That's it. We are live. And yeah, good evening, everybody in the UK. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone else. Today is the 27th of December, 2018. We've got stiff competition right now, haven't we? Playing permaculture with Mark on the go with his guest. He's doing very well. Very pleased for him. Anyway, good evening, chat room. I can see that Dawn's there and Nimble Horse and Marilyn was there earlier on, and people will come in. There's Dawn right in again. Anyway, on the panel today we have Patricia and we have Plain Permaculture. So good evening to you. I know we've said hello already, but we have to say hello again.
Hey everybody.
Hey. So a few more people have come in the chat room now. Racer's there. So that's good. Anyway, so you wrote me a letter.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with the letter, or do you want to start with a little bit about permaculture?
I'll start with the letter because it has a bit about permaculture in there.
Go for it. And also, thank you so much for making the flyer for the hangout tonight. I thought that was really good.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I had an idea, and of course it ties in with permaculture, and it brings permaculture and flat earth together. But seeing everybody excited about the conferences and how much energy and time goes into them, I was just thinking we can harness that energy and really either in addition or instead of the conferences, really start to make
a project. Might have a project.
Yeah.
We did very quickly before you get into your letter. We had this discussion one night ourselves, or we were talking. I can't remember if it was an after hangout, and we said, wouldn't it be nice if there was a project where even if you built 2 people or a couple of houses or whatever it was, there was something, and there was this project you did, and at the end of it there was an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Spending money that way. Yours is a little bit different, but it's the same sort of thing. But anyway, carry on.
Well, it really incorporates some tried and true methods from permaculture or from the natural living world. I know a lot of people aren't really aware of what permaculture is, and I'll go into that. But so basically, I sent as many people as I could an email with an idea that incorporates how we can incorporate conferences, meetups, or things like that, along with day-to-day living and other activities that can create community and incorporate waking people up and all that good stuff. So I'll just start by reading what I wrote everybody. Okay. This message goes out to all the real people who are willing and ready to do something about the various deceptions and how that affects how we are living naturally or lack thereof. Coming from the natural living world myself, I can clearly see how many people are lost. Of course, I'm not perfect, but I'm fully aware of the path I'm on and where it leads. Not being one to just live my life and create a paradise just for myself, I really feel the need to tell others about the natural path so more and more people can join in and participate in creating the world we truly were meant to live in. As I see it, we have been living in and on the correct earth while thinking otherwise, but we have been living day to day incorrectly while we are either thinking we are living correctly or just aren't aware of the potential way we could be living. In so many aspects of life, through the unnatural system, or what many call the matrix, the true good path is hidden and replaced with a false dichotomy. I see many people reacting to the deception rather than living in the truth. Also, we are often overlooking the basics of life, including water, food, and shelter, all of which can be found directly at and through the source of all life, the natural system we truly live in and on, which we call Earth. Just like if you look into the true shape and nature of Earth, you will come across flat Earth. If you look into natural living and symbiotic behaviors concerning life and Earth in general, you will come across permaculture. It's a word created in recent times out of the need to describe and organize in taking action in the world toward the positive. Rather than going against something, it is a proactive approach toward something good with the goal of thriving in abundance while taking care of the earth. For those still not sure, or perhaps haven't come across permaculture before, permaculture is, I often say, an ethical design science based on the best examples from nature/creation. It is an open source living natural science created from and often improving on the best examples from what some may call the Book of Life. It's a whole systems approach to designing for living and thriving in abundance. If Flat Earth is where we live, permaculture is how we live. If we are to live in this world, we might as well get to know it and how to symbiotically interact with it. I cannot make nor is it a desire to force people to look into this, even though I feel everyone should. All I can do is share and encourage it. To be honest, so many people I come across are ignoring what is to me the obvious approach to both separating ourselves from the unnatural system and symbiotically connecting to the natural system we obviously and truly live in. With Flat Earth exposing the depths of the manipulators or their, quote, their deception, and permaculture being a collection of innate natural knowledge and techniques, I find the two together are the key. Flat Earth being relatively new in its resurgence or awareness, and permaculture being around for a short while with a growing reputation for improving and helping people's lives all around the world. To me, the two together have the potential to bring us back to the real natural world. As the name of, quote, their game is disconnection, the obvious solutions are through balanced connection. As others have said, currently most of us seem to be going through separation on many levels, trauma and anxiety. Having recently seen how much time and energy people are putting into these conferences, it gave me an idea. First, let me say I have nothing against the concept of, nor do I desire to force people to do anything. I agree people should do what they feel is right. I do feel there is more to do in other areas of life than the conferences, meetups, or other Flat Earth activism, or that the conferences, meetups, and other Flat Earth activism lacks, especially in areas of day-to-day life and permanent examples in real life. In absence of people jumping into permaculture and living that way, I think there needs to be a way to, again, combine permaculture and Flat Earth in a way it can't be ignored. Often in permaculture, the best way to introduce the subject is by examples or demonstration sites, often called permaculture research institutes. Combining both subjects' approaches can create something really powerful. The advantage Flat Earth has right now is its growing popularity and passion to do something to change things for the better. If we were to come together and say, buy some land to operate a permanent site for both Flat Earth and permaculture, I think and feel we can start to make more permanent changes in both the local communities and the world in general. At the very least, we can take the next step and initiate the transition to a better world. So this is my idea. Excuse me. This can be in addition to or instead of the current conferences or meetups. Using the amount of interest in the conferences and or meetups and all real life interactions and the potential money spent, we can get together and raise funds for land, starting with one site first, to have multiple permanent locations regionally located and potentially have a conference or meetup tour. Eventually, after many sites are set up between the conference or meetup locations, a collective activism tour type thing could be done at locations between the sites. I imagine there would be interest to follow or tour to multiple sites for meetups or conferences like people do or did for popular bands. Volunteering at each site toward the gardening or farming and local communities could help these people as well. When the meetings aren't happening, the space created for that aspect could be used for many things like a local on-site market or courses or guest speakers or anything the space can be used for. The rest of the property would be used for a permaculture farm and or research institute or demonstration site. Any and all excess profits beyond what is needed to return to the property/system would be used to spread both permaculture and flat earth and recreate the model elsewhere. The idea being a repeatable model that could be copied around the world. Many more options and details to this, but I kept it shorter for this email. Anyways, this is a way to transition out of the unnatural system and its deceptions. It can be a real life, in your face example to reach more people, since a lot of people seem to be reluctant to live and think naturally due to programming. It also can be a real life demonstration for those that seem to be perpetual followers. We can refer people to a natural system and way of life rather than just trying to fight the system and possibly just creating a flat earth flavored unnatural system. Money can be used in the beginning, but this model or system has the potential to move into trade or barter as well. The potential for many overlapping projects for both permaculture and flat earth is huge. For example, a large Buckminster Fuller type geodesic dome greenhouse could be used to create a whole earth model or working demonstration. If the land is large enough and suits it, a permanent flat earth experiment and example could potentially be created. There are so many things we could do with such a site. So that's my idea, or rather a way for us to both come together and change the world for the better, permanently. I'm doing this more or less on a smaller scale so I can clearly see the potential. My main focus right now is to get myself fully connected to Earth while covering the basics directly. I would love for others to join me so we can actually leave the deceptions behind and move forward toward real natural living, excuse me, and thriving in abundance like we have the potential to create and do. I'm very open to helping a larger collective project as well as anyone's smaller projects. I do think many more smaller projects are harder to deter or control for the manipulators, or quote they, although a certain size would be required to hold larger meetups or conferences. Any and all feedback is welcome. Please share this idea with others. To me, the solutions are simple and timeless and have been right in front of us the whole time. We can do this with love and appreciation, plain permaculture. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Whoa, that was quite a mouthful letter, but carry on.
So anything you didn't understand, let me know.
I think, like I said before we started, I know a little bit more because obviously I've had a hangout with you. You know, obviously you made the trailer. I can see what you're talking about. But just for the chat room, in case people have missed that trailer, please explain what permaculture is.
So it's basically, it's a word that was coined or created back in the 70s, and it's an approach or a way of thinking that is holistic and is based on 3 ethics, which is care of earth, care of people, and then basically care of future, or sometimes they say fair share, which is so all your surplus goes back to the first 2, earth and people. But it's based off examples in nature. For instance, a forest produces so much biomass compared to say a traditional farm, and there's no fertilizers and no pesticides and none of that bad stuff introduced into the forest, and it grows all on its own. So you basically take natural patterns of nature and actually improve on it or make it more productive when you combine human activities or goals. So, I mean, it's a lot of things. It really has to do with all of life and living, but it's often thought of as like gardening or agriculture, but it has to do with the efficiency of your house, how all the elements on a particular piece of land or property, how they all interact and come together. So, I mean, I usually say, to make it short, I usually say an ethical design science based on nature or creation. But it's a really big subject, and I'm actually going to make a basic video of a bunch of people talking about what permaculture is. So that'll be my next video, so people can look forward to that if they really don't understand what it is.
Yeah, it's a way of living, isn't it? It's not just about the fact you're growing stuff. It's a whole way of living, isn't it? And you use the word thrive. And then I thought about it. That's what Mr. Thrive and Survive's about, isn't it? Making sure, well, I'm sure that's what his channel was about. Like, you could survive, thrive and survive when things got bad. It's the same sort of thing. It's just differently. You're thriving. Yeah.
So a lot of times people, or the word sustainable comes around a lot. And it's even starting to be used in like government organizations and stuff, but they use it for a different meaning. But when you think of things like sustainable, it's really an energy audit. And sustainable is a system producing enough energy over its lifetime to replenish itself. And sometimes sustainable is used it replaces, or people use it in place of abundance. But sustainable probably to me means just making enough energy to replace the energy that was expended over the lifetime of a system. So it's really just survival. And permaculture is really about thriving and abundance, which is producing more or excess energy over the lifetime of a system. And so much of permaculture is based on permanence, or the ability for something to sustain itself over long periods of time, or generations after generations. So it's really an approach to living unselfishly and taking care of yourself and future generations.
So this whole system is a chain, isn't it? That's what you're working through, is a chain of nature as it's going through. You're not, you're using it, you're doing things naturally, and yeah, that kind of thing, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the world...
It's a network, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's a systems approach. So you really look at all the elements. You look at them individually, but you also look at them on a whole. And yeah, nature really has given us a lot of the best examples of what we should be doing. And oftentimes we're living as if we're separate from nature, but we're really a part of it. And no matter how many boxes people put themselves in, or or fake unnatural life support systems. We're all living in nature. We're all living in this created natural environment. And it's about time we stop ignoring that.
You must be living on some kind of farm already, though, aren't you?
Yeah, well,
rather than the concrete jungle that a lot of people live in nowadays.
Yeah, well, for the first 25 years of my life, I lived in one of the largest cities in the U.S. So, I mean, I know how that life is, but probably I've probably been on the property that we have now for maybe 6 years, and so it's at the beginning stages, but for me, I can really see where it's going and the potential. And I mean, it is awesome already, and it's going to be really, really awesome in the future. So
does that mean you're basically self-sufficient then now?
I wouldn't say that right now. Right now, we're substituting a lot of stuff from other farms, and occasionally we'll get random things either online or at a local natural food store. But I mean, it's the way permaculture is you start out by doing a lot, and then over time your yields build up and everything grows. It's almost like a human. Like when they're a baby, you might not see the potential they have as an adult human, but as you know, they grow and it gets faster and faster, then all of a sudden they're a full-grown human. And
the case that you have, oh my goodness, his name's gone out of my brain at this precise moment. He's a Facebook friend, and he's been one of my oldest Facebook friends. But basically, he has land, and he puts everything out, and it all grows, and they all grow in between each other and stuff like that. That's what you're talking about when you're saying, just let it grow, it goes, because you're growing everything kind of together, sort of thing, naturally.
Yeah, and also it just starts supporting itself. It's like you put things into place, and nature takes it over, and it does things you would never think it could, and it goes fast, like a lot faster than you think it would. If you were like, if you do a traditional garden, you're tilling every year, you're compacting the soil, you're basically starting over every year. Whereas with permaculture, well, first of all, a lot of it's based off of perennial systems. So there's a lot of things that come back year after year. But even if you're doing annuals, the soil builds up. And if you've ever heard of no-till gardening, it's basically you don't till it, you don't walk on it, and you just build up the life, and it just builds up and builds up, and eventually it's just so fertile and grows so much that you just have an abundance, and then you start sharing, basically.
And when did you start getting into all this?
Probably really getting into permaculture, probably late teens, maybe. I mean, I probably got into more organic stuff first, and then I don't know when I was exposed to it, but you know, just one of those things where it's like your home. It's like flat Earth, kind of, and it's kind of like, why are we not doing this? Why, you know, even within my family, why is my family not doing this? Why are we not connected to the land? Why are we not passing stuff on?
Most of us don't even grow our own vegetables, do we, anymore? I mean, you know, my grandparents used to have an allotment in the garden, and I'm not saying that people don't, but I mean, generally we just go to the supermarket now. We don't even grow our own vegetables.
Yeah, I mean, really the MO of what I call the unnatural system, or people say the matrix, you could say governments, or sometimes everybody says they, but this system, the unnatural system, has really pushed for separation on all levels. So they separate you from yourself, from your family, from the earth, and they start centralizing all the systems so they can gain control over all aspects of your life. So yeah, I mean, grocery stores, that they weren't even around for, they've only been around, what, 70 years? What is it? I don't know. They haven't been around forever. So people back in the day, way back in the day, I guess, really, I mean, there's no other choice. They either lived by connecting to earth, or they perished. So there was no choice back in the day. So that's why I'm thinking that like often you see in movies or TV shows, they'll portray history as like there were peasants and they're always struggling, and everybody had like one little tiny piece of bread a day or something. But there's no way it was like that, because they didn't have the centralized systems as we do today, or the technology to control everybody. And I just think that they had to have been way more connected, just out of necessity way back in the day.
But they're making it look like somewhere in the sort of after the Victorian times, we started to actually have the crops and get tractors and combine harvesters, and we started to actually have crops. You know, we're actually doing that thing, but on a smaller scale. All of us were doing that.
Yeah.
That's before. I mean, before all the television and all that stuff that they ploughed into us, and money, and going to the supermarkets. I do know of a place in Turkey where they do that. They have it more like a festival once a year, where everybody brings stuff and they actually barter it. But that's what they used to do anyway.
Like a harvest?
Sorry?
Maybe? Like a harvest festival?
Well, that's how they used to live with each other, was bartering foods and things because they didn't have money. So they barter their goods. But once a year, they make sure it's a kind of festival. I was there once when they were actually holding this festival, and the people then would bring all their goods and barter them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of
how we used to live.
Yeah, I think in a lot of places of the world. I mean, I haven't personally visited a lot of places, but I think there's still places left where they have essentially a market every day, and everybody brings produce and food, and I don't know if there's as much of a bartering system, but there's at least still that market, that place where farmers, or I think a lot of times people are wild crafting or just harvesting things from like a jungle and bringing them and selling them. But that, I mean, everything used to be not as centralized, and there used to be villages, and it would be surrounding farms around the villages that support the villages. And it just seems like there's obvious things that we need to do, and within the flat earth community, it seems like people are going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it seems like a lot of us are not realizing that we need to take care of some of the more foundational things around us. Like,
just to explain to people then, like for this permaculture, what is it you've done so far to include this permaculture life for you? What is it people need to do to change then?
well, first it's just dive into the knowledge, dive into what has been gathered in the permaculture world, online or in books. You know, if you're not connected, like if you're in an apartment or something, really your goal should be learning about things like permaculture. And then the next step is getting connected to land, however you can, even if it's not your property. We all should have a goal of connecting to land. I mean, there's not much of any other choice. You either connect to the land or we stay, or you're essentially a slave to the unnatural system that takes resources and acts as a middleman to distribute to the people. But we need to go to the source directly and bypass the middleman and all the governments and all that stuff. What was your question again?
Well, I actually asked what it was that you've done in your life to change to include permaculture in your life. Look, I just stopped.
Okay.
Start when you said it's an abundance. Is that because you'll be planting stuff all year round, and basically when that's finishing, another one will be harvesting, and then you're replanting, and then, do you know what I mean? So everything's overlapping all the time, but there's available food and vegetables off what you're growing. That's what you mean, yeah?
Yeah, but abundance in the way that there will be stuff all year, but also there will be more than you need and more than the system needs. And also the fact that people think that plants pull so much, or people think that plants essentially grow from the earth more than they do, or that they suck more nutrients out of the soil than they do. And really, most of the energy a plant needs is from the air and from
water.
the sun.
And water.
Yeah, water is a big part of it, for sure. Water is one of the limiting factors, and one of the things that's really focused on. It's one of the first things focused on in permaculture, for sure. A lot of what the plants need really is taken care of by placing the plants in the correct place and giving them the relationships with the other plants and the other life, where it all becomes symbiotic and supports itself. You can see abundance in like a tree, like a fruit tree, like an apple tree. At the beginning, it gives you maybe a little bit of fruit, and then once it becomes really mature, it's giving you so much fruit that you either have to can it or process it or whatever. But the abundance really is both the growth and the fact that you get more than you need. And so I began by first learning about permaculture and just diving in and getting all the books and looking online. And then the next step was doing a little test garden, because I actually had a little yard to practice in. And so I started a garden in my backyard. And then when I knew we were going to move, I collected a bunch of fruit trees. I had like hundreds of trees, and I ended up having to take just a truckload of trees to our property, which I really don't recommend that. I recommend you get the property and then buy the trees, but I was just so into it, I couldn't wait. But so yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite difficult moving trees. How big were the trees?
Hold on, I have to cough real quick.
Oh, that's awful. That is when I know when you want to hang out and you need to cough. You have to mute yourself. You're back now.
Okay. Yeah, the trees were like 5 feet or so.
Right. What and how did what they were already planted and you had to dig them up?
No, I actually had them in pots, so it was like I was collecting a bunch of trees, and yeah, I mean, I don't recommend it, but it was, I mean, it's just how it went. And then when I got to the property, I planted all of them, and some of them didn't survive, but that's how it goes.
How many of the trees survived then?
Maybe a couple dozen.
Right.
Out of I don't know, maybe 40 or so. But
right.
Some of them were because I moved from a different climate and they weren't really suited. But yeah, so one of the things that you do first on a property is plant trees, because the trees take forever to mature. And there's that saying, the best time to plant a fruit tree is 20 years ago, and then the next best is right now.
Right. Keep planting those trees. Trees are really good anyway. A lot of people don't realize that we need the trees and we need them to resonate. They do brilliant things for us, and they're quite electric as well, aren't they?
Yeah. And they're very perennial, which is what permaculture emphasizes a lot, is perennial systems.
And then what did you do then? So you got the trees.
Yeah. So, you know, the first thing is really observing and figuring out how all the elements go through the piece of property. So the sun, the wind, the rain, if there's any potential for fire, you can ask the neighbors or people that have lived there longer and figure out where that might come, so you can plan for that. And then like I said, one of the first things is to deal with the water and how the water moves through the system. So I'm still working a little bit on that, but in permaculture, we often do a lot of earthworks or shaping the land so that you optimize the patterns that the water moves through the piece of property, and you really want to slow down and hold as much water as possible to rehydrate the landscape, because probably most landscapes you encounter are going to be deficient in hydration. And if you have if you have a problem with too much water, then that's a really good problem, actually. You can be very productive with too much water. But so I've been working on earthworks, and then the other thing is planning out where you're going to build your house. So we built a house, and and what else? Other structures and buildings you want to think about, and then you just start. Basically the whole property becomes a garden, and it's most efficient to start right outside your house. So often people create what's called an herb spiral. So it's a little garden that's in the shape of a spiral, and it spirals up in a little mound, and you put a bunch of herbs there, and it's very efficient and surface area, and it produces a lot. And so you put all your culinary herbs in an herb spiral, and you put it as close to right outside your kitchen as possible. And let's see what else.
Basically, permaculture is all about your land, and then basically shape it. First of all, you need to know where the water's coming and exiting, because obviously you don't want your crops like too drenched or too dry. So there's loads of things you've got to work out about your land.
Yeah. First thing is paying attention to all that stuff. Yeah.
It's getting back to actually having land, isn't it? Because a lot of people now are all in apartments apart from each other.
Yeah. And I mean, really in an apartment, unless you have a balcony, pretty much the only thing you can do is maybe a few inside plants.
You mean grow some microgreens?
Yeah, microgreens and sprouts. Besides that, I don't know what else you can do. I mean,
that's the start, isn't it? Even if we, had a couple of window ledges or little spaces by windows that we could just grow a few of our own vegetables and start learning to grow our own things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fish out of water like you are in an apartment, really you should be focusing on gaining that knowledge and then finding land, even if it's like a friend's piece and you just visit or whatever. But and besides that, what could help is being knowledgeable in how things should be produced. So being knowledgeable in permaculture, and then finding a farm that uses those practices, and then buying your food from them. So sourcing things correctly could be one step taken.
So how long have you been creating your permaculture land then?
Well, currently the piece I'm on, it's probably only been like 6 years. So it's in its earlier stages, but it's a pretty diverse piece of land, and it has lots of slope, which is good for lots of things. And it's got a lot of forest, so there's a lot of biomass that could be used. Besides giving you a tour, it's hard to describe. We have lots of we have one section of the property where when we first got there, we just wanted to do something. So we put essentially a bunch of hugel cultures, which is raised beds with wood buried in the middle, and they over time they break down and provide fertilizer and habitat for lots of living things, and then they become a sponge and hold a bunch of water, so eventually you don't have to really water them. But we use those beds and put in a bunch of perennial herbs and stuff, so those are getting pretty big now. So eventually we'll have excess herbs that we can sell or give to the neighbors. And then this year was pretty good for some of the fruit. Let's see, we still have about the only thing left is medlars. Have you ever heard of those? MEDLAR, I think.
Again?
It's a type of fruit tree, medlar.
No, I don't know if I have. We have different kind of trees here, I think.
I want to say it's from the UK area, but maybe not.
Sorry? What's it called again?
MEDLAR.
MEDLAR. Medlar. Let's look it up. You've got me researching now online.
But those were pretty good this year, and
oh right, I don't. What? That's from England.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's a shrub or small tree full of, and it has fruit.
Yeah, those are pretty interesting. There's a lot of trees I got from a place in California called Trees of Antiquity, and they specialize in heirloom fruit trees. So one of the apple trees I have is from 1200 AD, supposedly. So
yeah, it says learn about the ancient medlar fruit and the process of bletting.
Yeah, I think that's when they take like 3 days to get soft or something. I don't like, you take them off the tree and then they get
fruit, and I've never heard of it before.
I mean, there's lots of these things.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Wow, and you'll think it's English, golly. We probably had everything perfect, and we're just ruining it. We're just ruining everything.
Well, I feel like that this is how this was just life in the past. This is how everybody grew and lived and thought about things, because this is the way that that you support life and life supports you. So if they didn't have the unnatural system where they could order food from Amazon or whatever, then they had to really think about things and do things correctly.
Which is good, isn't it? Because we don't think about that. We just get our plastic bags and go to the supermarket.
Yeah. I mean, what really gets me is that people complain about having to work when they should really question why they're working. You know, I would guess most people at a basic level are working really for the basics. They're working for water, food, and shelter. And if they realized they could get all those things directly from Earth, from connecting directly to Earth, then that need to work or be a slave would either go away completely or be reduced to such a level that they could get creative about it.
So it's slightly different thinking again, because like I said, a lot of us now, unfortunately, are in apartments or in housing estates. And here in the UK, the gardens get smaller and smaller. It's just like a patio. That's what they give you nowadays. You're saying get back to the roots of things, you know, start living out of town, getting land and just doing things differently.
Yeah, and even if you have, ideally everybody would have, you know, maybe a little bit more than an acre, but a small piece like a postage stamp lot, you can really grow a lot, at least in the meantime. And even the overall value of your house should go up.
Does that mean that you basically grow all your own vegetables?
Me personally, not yet, but that's, you know, one of the goals and one of the things that will happen pretty quickly. But there's also there's a bit of a need to have a community and share things, because one person's piece of land may not be good for everything, but you know, collectively you can really fill in those gaps. Plus, you're going to want community. You're going to want to be around people, at least at various points. So
basically, we call them like farmers markets. So it'd be going back to that, basically, going back to markets and bartering, and obviously people taking control of themselves, thriving.
Yeah, right now when I go to farmers markets, they're very good, but they don't have the amount of stuff that you would really need in order to replace your own garden. So often people are just supplementing here and there, and they're still going to the grocery store. That's not to say that if you went to the farm directly, they wouldn't have that much food. But like if you were replacing your own need for tomatoes, you would have to buy so many tomatoes at the farmer's market. Whereas people typically use it as kind of a grocery store thing, where they get the day's food or the amount of food they need for that day, or just a meal. But in other words, we really need to either grow a lot more or buy a lot more directly from the farms.
What you mean, start not going to the supermarkets and going more to local farms?
Yeah, I mean, like the farmers markets, like the farmers markets here are maybe once a week, and then sometimes, maybe bad weather times, there is no market. So I mean, once a week, unless you get a whole lot, that once a week, you're not going to have enough for. So the markets really either have to be more often, or people are just going to have to get a whole lot more that day.
So how do you suggest that we do all this then? Just asking.
Well, it seems like people.
Is it more in your mind? Because we could all do it on a much smaller scale in our little gardens. Is it like a change of mind, how we think, what we do with where we live, sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, everybody needs a little bit of a change in the way they're thinking, but it's really happening a lot. If people aren't aware of permaculture or haven't looked in to to online stuff, for example, there's really a lot going on, and it's very spread out around the world, and it's getting more and more popular. The whole point of my channel was to bring permaculture to I guess, the flat Earth world, and all the people in the community, or all the people online that are talking about it, because I really hear from permaculture, or no, not from flat Earth people. I really hear everybody talking about things as if they're ready for taking the next step. And even though it might seem like it's a step backward, this really is the next step. This diving into permaculture and just gaining the language to talk about it is probably the first step. And then once people are aware of it and aware of its potential, then we can really have these discussions on how to, like I said, create permanent examples in the real world. Because I don't know about you, but I don't plan on being online forever. It's hard for me not to realize the damaging effects that screens and these devices have on my overall health and well-being. So I don't plan on being online forever. So I would like for us to really start connecting in real life and creating those permanent and perpetual examples, so we can, I think a lot of people in flat Earth are really aware and ready for a better day-to-day existence. And it would really benefit everyone to use as much energy or time, or how do I say it? If they would dive into permaculture as deeply as they did flat Earth, then I think everybody would come out the other end exponentially more ready and well equipped to do the things I think we all really want to do.
Can I just say, can you see, if I put this in our chat room, the chat room can't see this, but on the Hangout, can you see that?
I
just sent a heart. Did you see the heart?
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Right, there's this for you, right, from the chat room. So I'm just going to put it in and you'll see it now. Can you see that one?
Yeah.
That's from Racer.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll check that out.
So I've just put in to read The Effects on Living System by Albert Roy Davis. So thank you for that, Racer. And I've passed that over to Plain Permaculture.
Yeah, so someone mentioned Sepp Holzer, and he's a really big popular figure in permaculture. And everybody should check out his works. There's a few documentaries online that you can find. So Sepp Holzer, Seppholzer, and he lives in Austria, and it's a place that's called it's often referred to as it's equated to Siberia. So it's really cold and mountainous, and he's very popular. For instance, he's one of the people that really made hugelkultur popular, which is the bearing of wood in a raised bed. And he does so many things really well. And he's very good at what's often called pushing the zone, or creating microclimates to grow things. Like, for instance, he can grow lemons or citrus in a really cold location, and he'll use maybe like a pond.
Really? How did you do that then? I thought those things.
Well, he creates microclimates, so he'll place it maybe like behind a pond, so that the sun warms that area, or he'll use rocks or other things to help create microclimates that things that usually can't grow there can. And so he's a popular one. And then a guy, Sepp Holzer is still alive, but there's a guy who has since passed from Japan called Masanobu Fukuoka. And he had a really popular book called One Straw Revolution. And that's a really good book. Everybody should read. And he got really good at what he called natural farming, or do nothing farming. And he would, it got to where he would just make these seed balls. So he put a bunch of different mixes of seeds together and roll them up into balls surrounded by clay. There's a few other things in there, but that's basically what it is. And then he would just throw them out. He would just walk around and throw them out, and things would just naturally.
I think I saw something like that on a video, but I think what they were doing is they're on a bigger scale, and it was trees, and they were in little pods with water and whatever they got, and they were just chucking them out of the aeroplane to reseed the place we're living in.
They were in balls?
Yeah, they're in balls.
Yeah, so it's a way to protect from birds and other wildlife that might get them before they germinate and have time to live. But and then when it rains, it naturally breaks down, and there's a little package of the right bacteria or mycorrhiza fungi for it to grow. So it has a better chance of growing that way. But he would just throw those out, and then basically come back at certain times and harvest. And he worked in what was it, like customs or something, doing plant analysis. And his father had an orchard, and he did a lot of trial and error, and I think he actually lost all those trees that his father had because he did something at the wrong time or something. I don't know, but basically you can learn from from his mistakes and what he does right, and there's a lot of good stuff he has. Jeff Lawton is another big person in permaculture in Australia, and he has lots of DVDs and documentaries, and I have quite a few of his stuff on my channel. There's of course, Bill Mollison, who co-founded Permaculture, is another good person to look up. And he, I think he passed away recently. So, I don't know, in the 2000, maybe 2016. I don't know.
Is the community quite big then? Is there lots of you? Like, because obviously you need to communicate, don't you?
Yeah, it's a growing thing, and there's some. I mean, it's very spread out. there's a lot of parallels to flat Earth in that way too, because people form their little cliques and groups, and some people interpret permaculture differently, and have their own quote brand or whatever. I mean, it's a very open source. It's not like a club. It's not a cult, as some people might think. But it's not.
It is a way of living, though.
Yeah, but it's very spread out in the way people practice it. I mean, a lot of people. There's really only a few things you can do wrong on a mainframe sort of level. Like if you just aren't aware of how water moves, or just major things. But other than that, it's very open to people's creative energies and different interpretations or implementations.
Yeah, it just sounds so like the way Jimmy, his name is. Have you heard of Jimmy Archer?
No.
He has his own little farm and he sells microgreens to restaurants and things. But in that concept, like you, like working out where everything will grow, and then it all grows kind of together. Even if he'll say, okay, I've got this crop here and this crop here, and I've got something here, but they're starting to all mingle together. And then over time, like you say, it reseeds itself, and a lot of these things will come up again.
Yeah.
That's what you mean, isn't it? When it's sustaining itself, because these things will seed and then it plants itself again without you doing it, and then the crops are coming again.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. I mean, whenever you create work, or how should I put it? You want to avoid creating work for yourself. So that, things reseeding themselves is a big part of it. I guess if you were breeding or doing something else, then you collect the seeds and do stuff. But it's very much open to your it's very much open to how much energy you want to put into a system. So it can be as complicated as you want, or as intense as you want. So you can create a system very complex that you have to interact with a lot, or you can make it just that you go out and you just harvest and that's it.
Yeah, I've got a couple of little videos by Jimmy that I put on Sun and Moon last year, so I'll send them to you, because I think that he's kind of doing what you're talking about, and then he sells it at markets and he sells it to the local shops.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I will send it to you. I haven't heard from him much lately, and he doesn't really like hangouts. He's a bit shy. So he made me a couple of videos last year and I put them on. But he's got his own little farm, so it's a little business.
Yeah. I mean, he may be like me, where it's just kind of awkward to talk to your computer, but
Not hangouts aren't for everybody. I mean, you don't do that many hangouts yourself, do you?
No, just these.
Oh, really? Oh, we're honoured to have you on here. And
well,
anyway,
so far,
you can then also use this video, can't you, for yourself, even if you wanted to cut it down and edit it to make your point about permaculture and send it on to all those people you wrote to.
Yeah, cool. I may do that. I don't know.
Because it's you talking, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping after my very first video, everybody would get it, and all of a sudden everybody would be talking about permaculture, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, lots of people say they want something, and oh yeah, but they don't change. Like, really, this whole thing about YouTube, we're all still on YouTube, but it's the biggest place if you want to communicate to people But there are other, platforms now. But I think, I don't know, Discord, how's Discord going? But again, we communicate more on here, but nobody wants to be here, but we're still here, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes such a, like, people are creating all their individual, or there's a lot of people that are creating individual websites, but it takes so much time to go to all these individual websites. So a central place really is easier, but it's a catch-22.
Yeah, it's a slight change of way, isn't it? Because you've got to get used to growing your stuff rather than buying it. And a lot of us now, unfortunately, we're buyers, aren't we? That's normality, isn't it? Whereas the normality was to grow it yourself.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you've ever done permaculture projects or visited a farm, you can clearly see the benefit or the potential this system has, even on a large scale, and it becomes, how do I say it? It becomes more and more obvious every year, or just as it remains just as true the first time you realize it as it does the next 10 years, 20 years. And those kinds of timeless solutions really, I think, are the things that'll bring us back to real life. And it really is very obvious when you see it. It's like flat Earth, kind of, and there's no going back. It's just, the solution is always the solution. And the preventative is the cure.
So what have you already changed, and how much of your food line have you already changed then?
How much of my food? Let's see.
Because obviously you're wanting us all to like become, to understand and be in this permaculture thing. So I'm just asking, how much of things have you changed? Sorry, some message come through as well. How much have you changed your life already then?
I mean, I've kind of always been kind of like this, so I see it more as just further growth in the direction I was going. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that.
How much of 10 years ago, say, or 15 years ago, your life, what you're doing to what you do now to sustain yourself?
Yeah, it's well, coming from the city, it's a big change to have a piece of property, and you have that sense of satisfaction that what you're putting in, you will get out. Even if it's 20 years later, you're gonna get something from it, and it really brings that sense of security and satisfaction that I think most people are missing, and it kind of erases that separation anxiety, and it gives you that.
Also the fact that for all this, really, because it's not just growing a few carrots or a few tomatoes, you're having to, that's the bit with nature, because you're having to learn to live with nature to grow your vegetables. Because otherwise, if you don't get it right, the vegetables aren't going to grow. So you've got to be in tune with nature and what's happening on your land. So this is about a slightly different way of life, isn't it? Because you need to have your vegetables to live. That's why you're going to live. So you're growing them all. So it's all living in nature, being in nature, working with nature. That's your concept, is it? Permaculture.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really how we all should be living, but people just don't realize it. But it's a sort of communication with the world, and it'll let you know if something's not going right, and it'll show you when you really harmonize or set things up the right way. It'll really take it and really amplify and reveal
because I think I know what you mean, because I've just put a couple of links in to the chat room of Jimmy Archer, and he's just got this land, and in a sense it looks a bit like a jungle, because everything, it looks like weeds almost, everything's growing and it just looks like a field of things, but really those are the turnips and whatever he's growing. You know, they're just dotted everywhere. The whole field is covered. There's no structure the same for him. He's just growing it all, and it's all growing and reseeding and planting, and obviously to plant the potatoes, things like that. But it's just, if you know, on those little videos, I've emailed them to you. It's just stuff's growing everywhere.
Yeah. A lot of times people actually can't see what is going on because they're so used to square gardens and heavily human manipulated systems, so that when you see a place like what you're describing, it's hard for people to realize that it's a whole edible garden or forest. And people, a lot of times it's hard for people to step away and let things do what they do in nature or naturally. And so much of what is programmed into us is that we need to always intensively interact with things. And if you're not working hard, then you're not accomplishing anything, or stuff like that, which is really not how things symbiotically work. It's about cooperation, not competition. And yeah, so when you see an abundant place like that, which really doesn't have the square gardens, it's often hard to realize what's going on, but you just have to look closer and closer, and you will see examples everywhere.
So what's your favorite vegetable that you grow? What's the easiest one? What's the easiest one to grow?
The easiest one. Easiest vegetable to grow. So many easy ones. Asparagus is really easy. You just plant that and it's perennial and it comes up every year. Potatoes are easy. They're pretty much all easy. I can't think of a hard one.
So how much? What are you growing in your garden then, or your land? What are you growing on your land?
Anything. It would take forever to say everything. It's really anything that I can.
Did you actually pick your land because of the soil it was? Because obviously there's different kind of soils, and I didn't really think about this till I was watching, like, for instance, the Rainbow Mountains. And then I was thinking, well, we have the same kind of thing here in the Isle of Wight. It's got all these different coloured sands, and then you can see that the sand is under the grass. So it means that we're walking on all these different coloured soils, and they're all woggling through the land. So you have to pick a certain kind of soil, do you, or does it not matter?
Permaculture really gives you the tools you need to deal with anything, even if it was solid rock. But solid rock would take a really long time. I mean, you'd have to bring a lot of inputs in and be very patient and have other sources. But so it's really whatever land you have ways of dealing with it. And there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to different types of soils. So one thing will grow really well on one type, and then
is it did you choose the land? What like you knew what the soils of your land were, or does it not quite matter? Because I'm saying with that Rainbow Mountains and the fact that it's here in the UK and the fact we're walking on it, we wouldn't know underneath all the soils are all different. Really, we wouldn't notice. And I mean, that we've got chalky areas or whatever, but it probably is that if you could take the grass off and look at it all, the land is covered in multicolored layers of earth.
Yeah, so our piece of land is very diverse, which is one of the attractions for me, because you can do a whole lot of different things, but it's very geologically diverse. Like towards the top, there's more clay and limestone, and then it transitions into sandy loam and sandstone. And there's a few other different types, but where like closer to our house is more of that clay sort of limestone sort of type of soil. But I mean, either of those I can deal with and do lots of things with. And so we didn't really get it based off of the soils, because we can do so much, and there wasn't any obvious horrible conditions where we are. And one of the draws is that it was a piece of land from somebody else's property, and it hadn't been sprayed and hadn't had any permanent damage that would really raise some red flags.
Besides, you mean, because I was married to a farmer, but he was more into sheep and things like that, rather than, not saying he didn't do crops, because he did, but some of it was to make the hay, like there were certain things. Anyway, we used to have this poster up on the wall, and it had a cauliflower on it, and it said, there are enough sprays sprayed on this cauliflower to turn you into one.
Yeah, a lot of the grazing operations, they do herbicides because it leaves the grass and it just kills the broadleaf plants. So that's something to look for. And you can see signs of all this stuff by what grows there. But on our property, it was just a little bit of overgrazing cows. And I mean, that's about it.
Is permaculture all to do with vegetables, or does it have meat in it as well? Just asking the question.
Oh, it's anything you want. So you can use it to produce animals for meat, or I guess keep them out of your system if you don't want that part. But it's not really for one or the other. But one thing to consider is animals in a system always improve the system, at least when they're done, when they're used correctly. So animals within a system amplify the abundance, really. So it's hard to exclude them. And basically there's a lot of tough questions you have to ask yourself. If let's say if you were vegan or something, because animals really are a part of everything. So there's some tough questions to ask in that area.
So you've got to work out what you're going to do with your land, really, haven't you, then? Which way you're going to do it. But it's, again, you were talking about the fact that it just brings, like the responsibility is yours and brings the power back to you. That's what this is about.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's about localizing power and energy not, you know, giving it away and then centralizing it somewhere else.
Okay, you're partway into your project. So where do you want to be in a few years' time with this permaculture then?
Well, the first thing is just taking care of me and my family's needs, and then after that, any abundance would be shared with neighbors. And then after that, I mean, eventually I have to think about possibly creating some income from it. So maybe selling at a market or creating a place to sell on the land. And then, so that brings a little bit of community to it, besides the sharing with neighbors. But yeah, it's very much about taking care of myself so I can help take care of other people.
Sounds good, that does. So with your letter that you've written, what is it your point of what is it you want people to think about then? Because obviously you've written this letter.
Well, I mean, I really need people, if people really want to do something, if people really want to change things, they really have to first become very familiar with permaculture, because that's the cutting edge of knowledge of how we live. And in Flat Earth, we're getting really good at figuring out where we live, but we need to incorporate how we live. And after that, we can really discuss projects like I was talking about. We can easily do these things if we come together, you know, and have the intention and really get serious about doing these things. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, so people
well, the message about your letter that you've written. So I just also caught in the chat room that where is it? Metal Slug Master said that he grew a 20-pound potato as a kid, not knowing it was a world record at the time.
Awesome. That's a pretty big potato.
How do you feel about like using your land if it's always got chemicals coming over one way or another in the air and chemtrails? You're not worrying quite so much about that. You just got to get on with growing your own vegetables. I suppose we're still here at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, like, you can only control so much of the world or around you. So, I mean, either way, we're gonna have to live, you know, especially if you think this stuff is gonna, how do I say it? If you think our awareness of things eventually will bring us to a point where someone will initiate something to stop, say, chemical spraying or whatever it is, pollution, then either way, in the meantime, we still have to live. So this is always the answer. And there's an aspect of permaculture that really has a lot of diversity and biomass and natural cycling, that really has the potential to remediate or repair a property. And so any chemicals that enter the system, really the best chance to filter those out or lock them in so they're inert within the system. Permaculture really gives you the ability to do so. So either way you cut it, it has a lot of the answers.
I was quite surprised that really, I know that they obviously need the light and the sun and stuff, but I was quite surprised that seeds and things only really need water. That's what gets them going. That's what they start growing from. Okay, you move them into plants, but it still seems to be the water, because if you don't water it, it dies.
Yeah. And they start out without light in the soil.
I know, that's weird, isn't it? And they do their little opening out of the breaking out. It's the water that does it, though, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, seeds are amazing. Yeah, the water, I mean, water really is life, right? We are basically water. Most of the world apparently is basically water.
Yeah.
So water really is life.
I was just a bit shocked, really, that you're right. I put the seed in, and then I poured the water on it, and in a couple of days, there's a shoot. And then it does all this out of a seed, you know, like this great big plant comes out of a seed.
Yeah, seeds are one of those amazing things. It's hard to comprehend.
Kind of supernatural what we're living in, isn't it? If water does something, imagine what it does to us then. We're drinking it, but it makes plants grow. I mean, break out of a seed and start growing.
Yeah. Water is a big emphasis in permaculture, and it's also one of the.
What you're saying is it not just managing, like maybe when it rains, which way the water, because you said you've got land with slopes on it, but you have your own water supply.
Yeah, so we have a well that we fill a tank with, and then also we incorporate gathering rain from the roof of any structure we have. And you start to realize that water really is that linchpin to what you're growing, or it's a limitation for your system. So the amount of water you have is
restrict
really, yeah. Yeah, waters, if you have enough water, you can pretty much grow anything, basically.
So it's water, then accommodation, food, or water, food, accommodation. Which way around do you put it then with your permaculture?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the order of the basic needs. It's water, food, shelter.
Yeah.
And shelter really is a big variable, because the farther north you go, the more important it becomes. And the farther south you go, more towards the equator, you know, you can almost live without one or just make a temporary one during the colder times. But that's why you get a lot of homeless people in places like California, where the weather is very warm in the winter. It's temperated, or it's whatchamacallit,
outside,
tempered by the ocean.
So what's it like for you where you live? Is it very sunny, or is it more like England? Because there are parts of America which are quite like England.
It's like it's on the edges of a lot of climates, so it's a bit dry, it's a bit Mediterranean, and a bit temperate. So, and then it varies year to year, and it seems like either the natural changes in climate or the manipulation of the jet stream makes every year pretty different. So I'm in South Central US. So it's very hot during summers, and we get a lot of our rain in the winter and the spring, so it's a bit Mediterranean.
So so your message with your letter, your message out, what's your message out right now? Because we've been going for an hour and a half. And if you did want to use this Hangout, it's probably not, you don't want to go on too long, because obviously you're just repeating the message, and this is a message.
Yeah.
Well, you'll come back on again, won't you? So,
I'm hoping for people. I was hoping for a little back and forth for people, with people to brainstorm on ideas like this. But
maybe just come back soon, and we'll call it brainstorming, and people can then maybe come up with some ideas, because if we put a little trailer out about brainstorming.
It's a little bit hard if people aren't familiar or aware of what I'm saying about permaculture, because then it's like they don't know what I'm talking about, really. But basically I have an idea, I know it will work. I don't want to force people into something, but does anybody else have an idea? Because I know this one will work.
Well, you've had some Racer put in about books for you to read, so obviously they've been looking at it, and a couple of other people were mentioning things and understood that fruit you were talking about, the medlar, it grew in Europe, and so people have been putting stuff in the chat room.
Yeah, and I know there are some people in Flat Earth that are into permaculture. I just don't think they've been in it long enough to realize how important it is, or else they would just be repeating permaculture, and making more videos on it. And really, let's say if everybody made one permaculture video to share with people, I think that would go very far. If people just start using the word permaculture more, it would help. And obviously, people might be resistant to do that because they don't know what it is, so they need to look into it. I mean, I'm not talking about something that's so out there. This is very basic stuff. So if, like I said before, if people are really serious about changing the world for the better, then we really have to catch up on a lot of how to live things through the permaculture world. And there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. I've approached permaculture people online in one of the largest forums there is, and it got a lot of attention, but at the same time, people struggle losing their ball, and it can be especially how do I say it? Permaculture people are very environmentally protective, and I bet a lot of times they take it personally if or they have an attachment to the whole planet sort of fantasy.
You mean?
So I think that it might be easier to get Flat Earth people to do permaculture rather than the other way around. But at the same time, I bet there's a lot of people that are waking up to Flat Earth too within permaculture. So
a bit of an exploration in the chat room, because Metal said they got here late, so I just put a description into the chat room about what permaculture means.
Yeah, and actually, if you look on Wikipedia, it's a pretty good rundown of permaculture. It's not that bad. And then there's I might make a video of different books and people and things to research within permaculture. That might help.
Yeah, I'll share it for you as well if you do that.
Okay.
Because we're here to help. We're here to help the people and those with obviously they're not quite ideas, because permaculture is a big thing. It wasn't your idea, but the fact that you're doing permaculture. I'm wondering whether you should talk to Aaron as well. Aaron, we've got Aaron coming on, Mr. Thrive and Survive, on the 4th of January. Aaron's is a program to look after ourselves, but it'll be full of things like this, and we might be able to help each other.
Well, yeah,
we want to tell.
He was on last time though.
Yeah, he's going to show more of the inside of the program and stuff and talk about what this program's about to Mr. Thrive and Survive.
Yeah, one thing that I mean, obviously we have to wait to see what that is, but when he was on here last time with me, he was talking about permaculture and all this stuff. But when he was on the last time he was on recently on your channel, he didn't really mention permaculture, so I don't know how much it's really based off of that. But a lot of it is we don't really have to. These aren't new concepts. We don't have to reinvent.
Anybody else to do this, you can do this. Just start doing it yourself.
Yeah, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is not for for lack of a better term, this is not rocket science. This is not this is not hard. This is not this is very, very basic, innate skills and knowledge that we can figure out and do right away. And we can do it on a large or small scale. We can do it personally and community wise. Yeah, so I mean, I'm hoping that Project Lumen is a bit of maybe it will help people transition into the real world from the system. I don't know.
We've got to look at other ways of looking after ourselves, haven't they? And it's nice to know that there are people like you and Aaron who have the ideas or the ways forward. Because we need ways forward. We can't just keep squabbling and going round and round in circles. We've got to move on, haven't we?
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is that I think I mentioned it in the letter, is that we need to, instead of reacting to the deception, we need to live in the truth. So what I mean by that is that there's so many channels that are breaking down movies and TV shows, and ooh, there's this little bit of truth in this or that. And if you were to stop and just live your life naturally just a little bit, you would realize that the real knowledge is in living naturally. It's not taking little pieces of the mind control or the programming from TV and then trying to figure the puzzle out that way, because that way is always reacting to something. It's not being proactive. It's if you continue doing that, then they can play mind games with you and just give you little bits and pieces of things to keep you, to string you along.
Busy on the wrong place, you mean?
Yeah, they can keep you on a path that is a false sense of truth and knowledge. Yeah, I just see a lot of people, it's like they're still addicted to the programming, and their excuse is that, oh, well, I get little bits of truth or I analyze it. And we need to just basically come together in the real world and form connections in real life and get off of these screens as much as possible, because these screens were not designed even for your entertainment. They're designed for control, really. I mean, everything kind of has a double-edged sword, but just in general, the screens are not good for your health or coming together.
Yeah, and even like you, if you're working out on the land, you're getting all those negative ions out of the ground, which are really good for you, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd rather watch a squirrel or watch a plant grow or watch a tree or experience anything natural and in real life versus any sort of good feeling thing on a screen. It's really, there's no comparison. And I mean, it's really a shame, especially to see young children staring at screens and getting ideas from screens and then just copying stuff.
I know we're using it to talk with right now, but all that stuff is to stop people talking, isn't it? I realised I went, before Christmas, I was out in the town centre for something. I just thought, wow, it's about 6 or 7 days before Christmas and there's hardly anybody here shopping. That's because most people get it online, which is convenient and great in one way, but that stopping is go out. You could have bumped into someone and then say, and have a conversation with someone. This way around, that's another way of stopping people communicating. Looking down at the screen, not communicating.
Yeah, as much as things like stores, and I was talking about grocery stores, as much as they are a bit of a separation from source, we're going into another sort of magnitude of separation with just doing everything online. And you're no longer, like you said, bumping into people in the real world and having a conversation. It's just everything's online. And then eventually, out of convenience or fear of going out or whatever it is, people will be stuck in their house and it'll essentially be a literal prison.
Yeah, it is a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah.
So it's not like through those years they've ever, even at school or anywhere, I don't mean pushed in that way, but pushed us towards growing our own vegetables and having our ecosystem and blah blah blah. It's all pushed. Everything has supermarkets, the globe, and lies and everything in it.
Yeah. If you ask me, all that children need to know is permaculture, and the rest of the things, they will, if they want to learn something, they'll be interested and they'll learn it. There's nothing that will hold them back. The forced indoctrination really siphons people's potential. And if you think about how much energy and how much vitality there is in children, you start to realize how much children could really affect everything. They could be creating so many things, even as young children, that would help benefit the world.
But you know what they've done even with that? I mean, you go in a classroom, and what does a child do most of its day for years in life? Watch the back of a teacher's, the back of a teacher while they're writing on a blackboard and asking them to copy it. It was a shame that they couldn't have more projects where the children are, I mean, I'm sure there are some at schools, but you know what I mean. The whole emphasis is about children growing and all this kind of stuff, and actually having groups and conversations. They're not allowed to communicate, are they? It's deemed as naughty and whatever, and schools, oh God, can you imagine doing it all over again? Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I mean, what do most kids or children look forward to? It's usually either lunch or recess or both. And if people are worried about the social aspects, like maybe they think school is really good because they socialize and stuff, well, kids can come together and create games and play and use their creative minds to come up with things. I mean, that's what we used to do as young children. We would come up with games, and oftentimes they weren't very formal, and you didn't, I mean, you kept score or whatever, but it was more about playing the game and interacting.
We used to, but I have to say though, even television, you know, when we were smaller, even if you were now starting to watch the television, a lot of the programs always had you going outside. Like there was Sage and Herbs, you know, they went outside. There was the Hammy Hamster thing, you know, okay, he was outside and they were little Hammy Hamster on a boat. Do you remember that? So
I don't know that one.
Hammy Hamster. Oh, what's it? It's the name of it. I forget what it's called now. Sorry, everybody. I think most people will know what I'm talking about in the UK. Then they're these little hamsters. They were like talking, had clothes on, and they get on boats and, you know, all sorts of things like this, and were riding around, and they weren't really having conversations, but they made them talk. But at least they were outside on rivers and little boats. Nowadays, everything is inside, or bombs, or blowing up, or killing, or whatever it is. It's nothing's sort of nature. That's my point. You know, they're not saying, "Hey, look, children, look at these plants growing." You know, mostly it's all to do with, well, you know, cartoons, isn't it?
Yeah, and TV used to be where if you didn't sit there when it was on, you missed it, and then there was nothing on TV, or, you know, I mean, I remember it used to be that children would be bored at times, and then you'd have to come up with something to do and use your creative mind.
As well, though, don't forget, don't go to the park. There'll be strangers there. Don't trust anybody. You know, that's the society we live in. Don't talk to strangers. Don't do this. I mean, we had to grow up through it all. But nowadays, don't go to the park. Don't go, oh, look, have a computer game. Here's, I've got you a new game.
Yeah. And even the way they're creating these cities, or developing these places.
So you're saying every school should have a vegetable patch, and the children should be growing vegetables and helping, you know, get some of these fruits and veg for the school meals.
Yeah, there's a lot of permaculture projects in schools already. Ideally, for me, I don't think we need school, but school could definitely use inclusion of permaculture projects. And especially there's a growing number, or I'm told there's a growing number of kids or children that are autistic and have all these problems, and I think they would really benefit from natural interaction, and gardening and stuff, and they'd probably be really good at it. It's a way they can connect. I was going to say that where I grew up, there was a bayou, or you know, a river that goes through the city, and we would have, or we would come up with all sorts of games and play deep in the bayou and stuff. And nowadays, if you go to the same place, they cut out all these trees, and they created this concrete track that you can walk on, and it has a completely different feel, and it's like you're still in the city, or partly in the city. It just seems like they're even developing everything to where you have no sense of nature, or no place to connect to nature. Especially the wild forests and the stuff that's at least a little bit untouched.
Yeah, but that's the other thing, is that mostly everything today is concrete jungle, isn't it, in a town? I know you're saying there are projects at school, but it's not like they go, hey, look, we've got the playing field, and we've got our permaculture bit there, and, you know, the children are helping in the school, and it's not done like that, is it? Lots of schools now just concrete, and it's like it's a waste of time, or it never existed.
Yeah, I don't know about where you are, but where I grew up, a lot of the schools were actually based off of prisons. That's how they were designed. So a lot of places, a lot of schools, I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had windows, but there's a lot of schools that they don't even have windows. So all you get is artificial light. And then you go insane.
And again, I worked in a school a few years ago now, but basically the children were coming in the morning in the school clubs. They were going to they weren't in the school, you know, they're in like, what do you call them, porter cabins. So they were in there, they'd be in there all day, they'd eat in there, they'd do the after school club in there, and there's no canteen, no nothing. Hundreds of children like this.
Yeah. And then
so basically saying we need to just start opening things up and putting things back.
Yeah, and I really encourage, since we're talking about children, I really encourage people to either teach their children or help their children learn, or learn alongside them if they don't know it themselves. But dive into permaculture with your children and really give them the skills they need to survive on at least a basic level. And you know, as they say, the children are the future. So if we can be honest with our children about the world we live in, and really give them the skills to use their energy in a positive way with things like permaculture.
A lot of this is, I know it sounds a bit of it sounds silly to say it, but a lot of us don't realise, even though you know you've got to grow vegetables, it just doesn't go in our heads. Because we're used to going to the supermarket, or we're used to other things now because we're programmed.
Yeah. In that letter, I mentioned that this, you know, we've been living on the correct Earth. We've been living on flat Earth, essentially, while thinking it was a globe. But we've been living incorrectly while maybe not considering it, or while maybe we even think we're living correctly. But we're so far from natural in the way we should be living. And so this may be way harder for people to understand than something like flat Earth, just because we're so inside the system. We've been doing it the wrong way for so long that it's so hard for people.
Permaculture has never existed, when really that's the way it was, and we've turned it into plastic almost.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I think that's why I'm finding it hard for people in the flat Earth community to wake up to it. I think it's just not in people's realm of possibility, or it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know, sort of thing.
Yeah, I just said that, and Robert Forsh has that saying, they don't know because they don't know.
Yeah.
and I know what it's like, because I'm just trying to put it in perspective, that it sounds so simple because we're talking about it right now. But, you know, I went to vote, but I didn't go to vote for anybody. I was spoiling my paper, but I went in and I actually filmed it. And for some reason, my phone, I don't know, I lost the video, but that was the point. But basically, I asked this person, I said, well, I would like to vote, but I don't want to vote for any of them. So why is there not a box just to say I voted, but I don't want, you know, you just have to spoil the paper, she said. And I said, but why isn't there a box on there? And the girl said, oh, I didn't think about that. And that's the kind of society we're in. Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about that. And that's what waking up's all about. And flat Earth, all things, I didn't think about that. And really, a lot of it's there, but we just don't think about it because that's the way we're trained, programmed.
Yeah, it's to be unconscious for sure, and separated. And voting is a good example. It's very much every 4 years it comes around, at least in the US. Whenever the presidential election comes around, there's so much divide and conquer within families, within communities. And the whole thing is really an exercise in consent. It's using your legal fiction to consent to the system. And I don't know about you, but when we vote here, we have to sign something. And that's another red flag. That is another exercise in consent. And if people don't realize by now, the government is literally a for-profit corporation. The voting for a president is voting for the president of a corporation, and the corporation's main goal basically is mind control, and that's really what the root of the word government is.
Thinking.
Yeah, it's a behavior and thought manipulation, really. And
so basically it's foreign to be growing your own vegetables when it's what you should be doing.
Yeah, growing vegetables is just a little tiny tip of the iceberg of what permaculture is, but it's definitely, any way you enter into permaculture, you'll start to see the picture. Just like you can kind of unravel any of the deceptions and get to things like flat Earth, or it's all connected. So
what hit you first then? Permaculture or flat Earth?
Permaculture for sure. But flat Earth is kind of it's something that you kind of realize you knew, but you didn't know. You know, it was subconsciously known, but you didn't consciously know it. But this is kind of the same thing with flat Earth, or with permaculture. But I definitely was into permaculture before flat Earth, formally at least.
Well, we've really enjoyed you coming to talk about this, and I think you're going to have to come back, and we can, like I said, maybe try and do a brainstorming night, and we can advertise it as that, so that people know when they're joining this hangout on the chat room. But is there anything else you'd like to say before? Because obviously we've been going for a few hours now, and it's probably a good time.
Yeah. Just that I know we can do it if we want to collectively come together and create stuff to further our goals of awakening people up and forming community and living the right way. We can do it. It's just a choice. You may not realize you have the choice, so I encourage you to look into permaculture, and yeah, we can do it.
So basically, the best thing to do is read up first of all, so that people really understand what the word, or what it's about, permaculture.
Yeah, and I'll come out with I don't plan on making a whole lot of videos on my channel just because it kind of waters down the message, but I'll put out a few more permaculture videos, just basic ones. And then, if you dive into permaculture, you can find it all over the internet, and there's plenty of documentaries, and I'll come out with some videos on people you can research and books that are good. And yeah,
good.
There's some basic knowledge we need to catch up on.
And sort of go back to the roots. Ha ha.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I hope the chat room have enjoyed it too. And obviously, permaculture is not on everybody's tongue yet, is it? So, you know, hopefully people watch this, they'll understand a bit more. And we will have plain permaculture back again and shortly, and get him to talk more. And he can do little videos in between, and then everybody will know more about it next time you come on.
I hope so.
Yeah, anyway, it's been a real pleasure. We'll say goodbye off air, but on air, thank you so much, everybody. Mwah. We're back next time is on Sunday with David Geometria, and we're going to be talking there about, you know, when all these banks and bailiffs and that write you what you need to do or what you can help yourself do. So it's the same thing, you know, we're here to as a platform so everybody can help each other. So it's permaculture for sun and moon because we're trying to help everybody and get the information out to people. But it's been a real pleasure, and Patricia might not say anything because she's got family there and they're in the background. But thank you, Patricia. Plain permaculture and chat room. See you Sunday.
Thank you. See you all later. Love and thanks.
Thank you so much. See you on Sunday.